Hello, everybody. Welcome. I think we've got about 200 people already here. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for making the time to be here. My name is Catherine, and we're going to do some formal introductions in just a moment when we get ready. So if you're just joining, hello, everybody. If you can maybe make sure you've got a pen and a piece of paper, because that'll help you to make sure that you're writing things down. And if you want to take a little moment to introduce yourself in the chat, the chat is open, so we're really keen to hear from you. If you would like to let us know what your name is and perhaps where you're working from, and you could also perhaps take a little moment to acknowledge the traditional owners on whose country you're on. So please let us know that. And when you are chatting to us, make sure that you give you some ideas about some of the things you're thinking about, perhaps the examples that you have in your own setting. Some strategies and ideas that you have. We'd love to hear them, and we can share them with everybody as we proceed. So keep that conversation going. Say hello to me, and hopefully you all had a really great Tuesday today. And I know that some people are going to be listening to the podcast as we get going. So some of you will be able to listen to it in your own time. So we're just going to get ready in just a moment. Welcome, everybody. The numbers are slowly climbing. We'll formally get started in just a moment. So if you're getting yourself organised, welcome. Feel free to say hello in the chat. Oh, there we go. Anne-Marie has started us off. So thanks very much, everybody. I can see them all. Their conversations are starting now. Thank you so much for that. So say hello, give us a sense of where you're from. You might also want to tell us, oh, we've got people from Perth, which is fantastic. So people all around Australia, which is terrific. And you might want to tell us how long you're working in family daycare for. You might also want to acknowledge the traditional owners on whose country you're on, and everybody's getting started in the chat, which is fantastic, because we're going to use this as we get going as a way to share ideas and strategies and questions. You might have a really good suggestion, something that you've done before in terms of risk. So let us know some of your thoughts. Oh, there we go. Someone's been 22 years in family daycare. There we go. That's a long time. Congratulations. Or someone I just saw 23 years. So that's a long time in family daycare. So congratulations for all of those people who've been working for more than 20 years. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes, and we've got people all piling in, which is great. Thank you. Oh, someone over 30 years. There we go. I think that must be the winner. So thank you very much for letting us know where you all fit. Tell us which family daycare service you work in. You might want to also acknowledge the traditional owners on whose country you work on. You might want to say hello. Feel free to say hello to each other. Some of you will recognise each other from other PD in your pocket. So make sure that you've saying hello. And I know that lots of you have actually been regular attenders. So thank you so much for joining in. I know it's a really busy time, 7 o'clock on a Tuesday, but others of you who are going to be joining us on the podcast, then fantastic to have you here a bit later on. So you'll be able to join. So thanks so much. The chat is going off, everybody. So fantastic to have you all talking to each other that way. And we'll just get started in 1 minute or so and welcome everybody. So there we go. Someone from Broken Hill, which is fantastic. Marrickville, hello. Lots of different people. Bankstown Family Daycare, excellent. So people from all over New South Wales in particular, which is fantastic. And also people from various parts of the country, which is terrific to have an opportunity where many of you join. I know we've got lots of you who are registered today, so thank you very much, everybody, for making the time and effort to be here. Really appreciate your efforts around participating in this great series. So thanks, everybody. So for those of you who are just joining us, we are doing a little bit of introduction in the chat. So find that space. It's down the bottom of your screen. Open that up and you'll find a conversation going off there. Everyone's introducing themselves and saying hello, and also making sure that you're familiarising yourself with that platform. We're going to use that as we go too, as a way to ask questions. So you might have a question that you're thinking about, something that you've particularly been wondering about in terms of the work around risk. So it is 7 o'clock, so we are going to get started. So formally welcome, everybody. Fantastic that you're all able to be here tonight. I know that for many of you, you've had a very busy day and you've been working really hard. So thank you so much for being a part of PD in Your Pocket, an opportunity that New South Wales Government in collaboration with New South Wales Family Daycare Association have brought to you today. So it's a really fantastic series, which I know many of you have been a part of. And this PD in Your Pocket is a really great subject matter too, something to be really sink your teeth into. So I'm going to share my screen in just a moment. But my name is Catharine Hydon, and I've been with you before on these PDs in Your Pocket. So it's great to be back again for this great conversation. So make sure you've got a piece of paper ready. Make sure you're thinking about some of the things that you might be experiencing, questions that you might have. So I'm going to remind you a couple of times as we get going so that you can share some thoughts and ideas with us as we discuss these. It's really important subject matter. So let's get going. And I'll be sharing my screen with you so you can see lots of different images, and we'll also get to see some great interviews as we progress today too. So I'm sure you'll look forward to hearing those. So before we officially begin the work around risk, I want to take a little moment to acknowledge the traditional owners on whose country you are on and I am on, and we are all on when we work with children in the context of family daycare. Now, of course, you're all on different lands. I'm here on the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi people, and it's great to be able to join you from Queensland. But I know that many of you are in New South Wales and other parts of Australia. And of course, New South Wales Family Daycare Association are presenting this directly from Gadigal country. So we acknowledge the traditional owners there. And it's important to remember that when we acknowledge the traditional owners, we're acknowledging that children have grown up strong in their culture for hundreds of years. And that, of course, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children have been kept safe by their families over many, many decades. And families have managed to keep children safe and manage their risks and help them to learn about being safe. So we know that we are standing on the shoulders of giants when we're thinking about this really important subject matter. So, of course, this risk management in family daycare is part of a series. Of course, you'll know about that because you've registered and you're all here as part of this conversation. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is a PD in Your Pocket program that is the next one along, and it's funded from the New South Wales Regulatory Authority, the New South Wales Department of Education. And hopefully you all received and read your resource booklet. So if you didn't quite get that, so reach out to us and let us know if you have any difficulties that way. I can see that quite a few of you have logged on to the Facebook page as well and have been chatting to Lisa as well in that space. So if you have any questions, make sure you send us through that. We've sent you a link to the topic booklet last week. So if you didn't receive it, keep watching this presentation, and also make sure you link on to the podcast as well, because that's a really great opportunity for some of you to maybe revisit some of the ideas. So just a reminder, there'll be a survey that'll be sent out, and we'd love you to fill that in. It gives us lots of really good information, and it helps us to support the program, and also helps us to talk to the New South Wales Regulatory Authority around the funding that we need to support these types of opportunities and to keep them really freely available for you. So thanks everybody who did that last time, but make sure you do it this time too, because it's really helpful and gives us a sense of what's working for you and what's not. So make sure you let us know. The other thing, of course, you did, which you'll remember, some of you, is that we asked you some questions about risk when you registered. So this is what you said, which is really fantastic. Some very insightful pieces of information here, I have to say. So firstly, we asked you, how well do you think you understand risk in family daycare and risk assessment in family daycare? And heaps of you said, 58% of you said mostly, which is great news. And 36% said a lot, which is terrific. So lots of you seem to say, you're saying about yourself that you understand it. There's a few of you who said maybe a little bit, and maybe hopefully that's lots of the people who are here today. The other thing you said we asked you about is doing your own risk assessments for excursions. Now, interestingly, 52% of you said, yes, always do it myself. And about 23% of you said that you do them with your coordinator or someone like your educational leader, for example, which is also great news. They're often a really good resource there. And some of you said that, no, the service does it for me. That's terrific that you're getting that help. It would be great for more and more of you to think about how you can be a part of the risk assessment process and include children as well in that process, which would be really exciting. And also some of you said, 19% of you, which really surprised me a little bit, said you don't go on excursions. And I want to say yet. So it's something that we're going to talk a little bit about today, but I would really encourage you to get out and about into your community. The other thing that we asked you is the things you're maybe most worried about or scared of in the family daycare context. And lots of you said that you're worried about lots of things. And this is not an opportunity to scare you or to make you feel worried. It's just that we know what risks we're managing, and we want to be a bit more aware of those things and think about how we might manage them over the time that you're working with children and their families. So you were worried about children being hurt in your service, maybe having an anaphylactic attack, something about, evacuation or a child being hurt on excursions, and, hurting yourself in family daycare, which I think is an important thing to think about. And some of you said that you're worried about lots of or all of these. So we know that some of you are a bit worried about some of these things. And hopefully today it's an opportunity for you to feel less concerned about that so that you can see how you can manage those things, because we know you're really clever people and you can start to think about what they might look like in your own setting. The other question we asked is, do you encourage children to engage in risky play? And we're going to hear a great presentation from Robyn, who's going to tell us a little bit more about that. And Lisa's going to interview her, which I know that you love those interviews. So they're really great content there. So we asked you about that, and you said, do you encourage children? And lots of you said, yes, always. Some of you said often, a few more of you said sometimes, and 38%, which really a bit surprised me, you said never. So we've got to make sure there that we know that children learn through taking managed risks and careful risks. And really, one of the important things about today is to make you feel a little bit more at ease about taking risks. It's not putting your children in danger, but it's giving children the opportunity to stretch their skills and to try something new. And of course, risk for young children looks different to if you are 42. And it doesn't mean doing something dangerous, but I think we'll talk a little bit more about that as we progress today. So hopefully, as I said before, you've got your pen in hand. If you have questions that you want wondering about, tell us about them, but also keep a note of them, because there might be something that you want to talk to your colleagues about. Someone else who's a fellow family daycare educator, you might want to get onto the Facebook page and ask a few questions in that space too, and share some thoughts and questions and wonderings. And you might also want to talk to your educational leader or some of the people who work in your family daycare service. So just keep a note of some of those things. So here's the things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what is risk management and why is it useful. And we're going to talk about the sorts of risks we face, but also what we do when we think there's an identified risk, the difference between minimising and managing. And then we're going to talk a bit more about how we minimise and manage risks, and doing a risk assessment, and also managing risky play. As I said, we're going to hear some great web videos of interviews of really helpful people who are thinking about these ideas all the time. And then we're going to ask if there's any questions at the end. So if you've got any questions, I'll open up the chat and we'll see what we've got in that space. So keep introducing yourself if you haven't done so already, and keep saying hello, and we're welcoming lots of people into this space. So let's just have a little bit of a think about what risk management is, or risk and risk management. So making sure that children are safe from harm is one of the most important things that you do as a family daycare educator. Not only is it the expectation of the law and the regulations, a very important part of what we do on a daily basis, but it's also about a commitment we make to children and their families to keep children safe while they learn and grow with us in our family daycare settings. So it's a really important thing that we do. It's not the only thing that we do, but it's a very important part of what we do. In fact, understanding risk and then understanding how we manage risk helps children to do some really extraordinary things and to learn and grow. So it's an enabling strategy, if you like. So risk is any situation that might put a child at harm. It's where there's some uncertainties, you're not sure what might happen. It's where there's a chance that something happens that's negative or that might cause children harm, and therefore it's something that we should pay attention to. Managing the risk is how we go about minimising, sort of reducing or taking away completely the risk that the children might have encountered. So we might say in a family daycare setting, of course, you're in a home, so you've got cleaning products. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. You have cleaning products in your house. There's cleaning products in lots of early childhood education and care settings. one of the things that we do is we realise that those things are harmful if children get access to them without supervision, or get access to them in a way that is going to be detrimental to their health. So we have a risk minimisation process where we keep those products up high, or we keep them away, locked away, or we keep them in a particular part of the space that children inhabit that they can't get access to. Now, it doesn't mean to say you never have cleaning products, and it doesn't mean to say that children don't sometimes use those things. We might choose cleaning products that are safe for children to use, soapy water, for example. So we would think about what is the risk and then think about how we manage that risk. So we know that ACEQA, so the Australian Children's Education and Care Quality Authority, along with the New South Wales Regulatory Authority and all of your nominated supervisors who look after the programs that you work in, are thinking about risk all the time. And so should we. All of us should think about this. So if we can't eliminate a hazard or where we think there might be potential injury, then we have to figure out what we're going to do to minimise it or to eliminate it so that we don't do that in the future. And in simple terms, if something serious happens, we've got to make sure that it is, or has the potential to happen, we've got to make sure that it is our business as people who work as professionals in this sector to ensure that those things don't happen. So, and that we minimise any risk involved. So really important to think about the fact that there's lots of different risks, and we're going to talk a bit more about that. And there's lots of different ways to manage those risks. And I know that lots of you are doing this on a daily basis, but it's an important conversation for us to have. Now, here's another thing which I think is really important to say. It doesn't mean to say we have to wrap children in bubble wrap. And this is a lovely image here. It's a bit, you know, over the top, obviously, but we don't want to have a situation where we are wrapping children up in bubble wrap and not allowing them to do anything that might be risky, you know, climb up on something or a jump off a rock, for example. If we're out and about in a park, there might be a nice big rock there. Now, we might have to, we will have done a risk assessment before we go to the park so that we can think about ways that we can support children to take risks that are able to be managed. Otherwise, we won't do anything that stretches children and puts them in a challenging space where they have to think a little bit more about their own and others' safety and take those managed risks. So a hazard is not about making sure that children never experience anything that is challenging or risky. In fact, risk management is not about wrapping children up in bubble wrap. It's about understanding the place that you work in, your family daycare home, and the communities that you're a part of, and the children that we care for and educate, and taking measures to ensure that children's wellbeing and safety is maintained at all times. And minimising harm and hazard is ultimately about making sure that children are safe while they learn and grow. And increasingly, we're going to ask children to be part of that conversation. So we want children to be participating in some of the decisions that are made. We want to bring them into those conversations, and indeed families as well. And I know some of you are doing that exact thing. So why is it useful? Why is risk management useful in family daycare? It just helps us work out what is risky and what is not, and helps us figure out how we're going to manage that risk. Or if we can, eliminate that risk so that we can keep children safe from harm. So it's a process that we go through. Sometimes we have to, well, in fact, a very good idea to review those processes from time to time so we strengthen them and make sure that they are really strong, and that we might come back and do risk management processes like risk assessments, and that we're always thinking, I wonder what the risk might look like. It doesn't mean to say that it's always the only thing you think about, but it's something you think about as you get out and about. You might go to pick up a child from school. You might start to do some cooking with children, and you're thinking a little bit about how you manage the risks. Now, talking to lots of your colleagues, maybe some of the people in the family daycare service, but also having conversations in places like this helps you to identify what in my family daycare home might be risky. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that process as we progress. So it's a useful way to respond to our obligations. Risk management asks family daycare educators to identify the risks that are present in your home and then manage them or work out what they might be, and also indeed how children might benefit from a few risky types of opportunities, what children's learning and development might look like if we try some of those things, And then how can we minimise those particular hazards if we feel like they are too dangerous for children? By identifying the hazards and what is at essence a risk that is taken, we can think about whether it would cause harm for children, whether it has a negative impact on children or indeed a positive one, what the families would say, what impact it has on us, and we can work on how we might manage it or minimise it or eliminate it depending on what we need to do. So we're sort of looking at the risk and deciding what the actions might look like. But it's a really sophisticated process, but I know that lots of you have done lots of these before and have been participating in this conversation for some time. So this hopefully will reinforce some of the things that you are already undertaking. So welcome to the first video that we have in our podcast, in our PD in our pocket, which indeed is going to be a podcast as well. And this video is a great video, and it's the first one with Jenny Smith from the New South Wales Regulatory Authority. So some of you, of course, will know you had a visit from an authorised officer from the New South Wales Department of Education, that your New South Wales Regulatory Authority, and she's going to be interviewed by Lisa Bryant, who you know, of course, and she'll talk to us about the main risks that the New South Wales Regulatory Authority is finding in family daycare and how can we address those in family daycare practice. And again, this would be a really good time to take a few notes about some of the things that Jenny talks about with Lisa, and you can have a think about whether there's questions that arise from that conversation, and you might want to ask that question at the end of today. So here's your first video. I'm going to turn my video off so that you can concentrate on the video.
Hi, everyone. I'm really pleased to have with me, because it's been so long in the making, this interview. This is Jenny Smith. Jenny's the Family Daycare Co-ordinator of the ECEC Directorate in the Department of Education. Good evening, Jenny. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. How are you? It's great to come along and have a chat with you tonight.
It sure is good for us to hear directly from the department about a topic as important as risk. So tell us, first of all, where is serious incidents happening in family daycare? What is the data telling us about where risk exists in family daycare?
Yeah, I'm going to try and talk nice and slow for you, Lisa, because I do have a tendency to speed up, especially when I'm talking about things that are interesting to us, and the family daycare space and risk and what's happening for our little people is always something that's very exciting for me. The data is really consistent with what we know from our observations and our visits to family daycare educators. So the data clearly shows that the highest risk or incidents in family daycare are your normal harms and hazards. So your trips, your falls, children being locked out of or inside of the service, children missing or unaccounted for, attendance of emergency services, incidents where medical attention was sought or ought to have been sought, and your general illness in children. I think COVID has certainly hit many of the children and people right across the world, not only New South Wales and our sector. And then your incident traumas, particularly around trips, falls, broken equipment, falls from broken equipment, access to items that could cause harm and hazard. So really, when we're looking at the Law and Reg section 167, also another high risk area, I guess, for us is sleep and rest. So in particular, Reg 81, where it looks at the appropriateness of sleep and safe sleep practices, Regulation 170, which is about following your policies and procedures, and then obviously harms and hazards and supervision all fall into that safe sleep practices and processes, and increases the risk when it comes to what we're seeing when we're observing practices both in our visits and in our data.
Okay, so let's look at your visits more. When when your people go out to family daycare services, like that's a whole heap of things that you've listed there. What are the absolute main ones that they're noticing on their visits and spot checks?
Yeah, sure. So these aren't an exhaustive list, but these are some of the common things that we often see. So as I said a minute ago, unsafe sleep practices. So we see children sometimes sleeping in prams or bouncers or baby rockers or bassinets. So that's not good things and don't comply with safe sleep practices with SIDS. Chemicals, so chemicals accessible in bathrooms, laundries, emergency exits, so those spaces that are used by and accessible to children, including walkways when children are going through a space to get to an approved space. So if they're going through an indoor space to go to an approved outdoor space, so it's checking those environments that the children travel through, as well as the approved spaces that they're in regularly. Unsafe equipment such as exposed wirings from walls, broken toys, items in kitchens or bathrooms that should be out of reach. So a classic one is safety latches on fridges, freezers, cupboards, doors, but you pull on them and they just open straight up. So there's no value in having a safety latch.
So you've got it there, but it just doesn't quite work.
Yeah, it just doesn't quite work, or it's broken, or the cupboard still opens anyway. So that's another one. Dangling electrical cords, so plugged in and turned on. So, your mobile phone cords, your computer cords, all those kind of things that are found really commonly in people's houses everywhere, but just need to be out of reach and not accessible to children when providing family daycare. But then we move to the outdoor environment. So things like broken fences, exposed nails, gaps in the fence, which can create escape risks, uneven and damaged pavers, which create trip hazards, gardens, so in an approved outdoor space. So things such as toxic plants, it's a really common thing that when educators move to a new residence or a service does a assessment of a property, just check the plants as well, because it's one of the ones that we often miss.
Is there a list of photos of toxic plants?
There
for
is,
those
there
of us
is,
that might move and don't know, a hemlock from a
Yes, there is, and I'm pretty sure it's on the Kids Safe website. So I'm pretty sure you can
right. Okay.
Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it is. And there's a
I hope
photo.
It's got photos of them as well, because I think that's necessary. Okay, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Keep going.
No, that's okay. Construction materials. So when people are renovating, just make sure any tools or construction materials are well out of the way. And then obviously a risk for us is around documentation, such as all of your records, your enrolment records, your child attendance records, your risk assessments, your authorizations, your medical management plans. So if they're either not present or not available at the Education and Care Service, or they're incomplete or inaccurate. So obviously the purpose of these documents is that the information is accurate and it's readily accessible in the event of an emergency. So when it's not, that creates a greater risk if an educator was to need to contact a parent in emergency, refer to a medical management plan, etc.
It feels like that's a really, really long list of things for everyone to look after. How do you manage to constantly be aware of so much risk?
Look, I agree with you, Lisa, and it's not an easy task, but that's where your home safety inspections really come into place. Most of those things that we listed would form part of your indoor and outdoor safety checks to start with. And then for the documentation, most services generally have processes and procedures in place to make sure that the documents are up to date. They're checked regularly by your coordination unit, and that you have everything that you need, including those conversations you have with families to update your records.
Okay, so let's move on to risk assessments. We know that everyone now knows how to do it in excursion ones, because we have to do those so often. What other risk, assessments or risk minimisation plans do family daycare educators need to have?
Yeah, so some of the risk assessments that people might consider, you're correct, the excursion risk assessment and the risk minimisation ones are required under the law and regulation, as are the transport risk assessments. So they would be the three that I would say to people you have to have as a minimum, because that's prescribed under the law and regs. With transport, consider things such as walking to and from school, walking to and from a park, for instance. So often people get the transport in the car or the bus, but they forget the transport between walking locations such as the school down the road or the park around the corner that the educators and children often attend. The other thing with risk transport is also all of the spaces that you're transporting children. So often we'll see educators will have the risk assessments and the authorizations to transport between the child's school and the educator's home, but they'll also transport the children to their own home, and they've just not got the authorization from the educator's house to the child's own house. So it's just making sure that all of those areas that you're transporting children are covered. So that would probably be one of the first ones I would suggest. Sleep and rest. So sleep and rest risk assessments that are individual to the needs of the children, and that have been developed in conjunction with families and the coordination team. So we would encourage, I suppose, families and educators and coordination units to work together to develop risk assessments around sleep and rest for children, to make sure that you're considering the specific needs of each child. So some children might have a medical condition that require additional monitoring or additional supports in the safe sleep space that needs to be considered and reflected in that risk assessment. What's really important for safe sleep risk assessments is that you also review them regularly, because as we know, children grow up, and the sleep and rest assessment that you maybe did when they were 6 months old, may not be relevant when they're 18 months old, or in fact when they're a preschooler. So it's really important that those documents are reviewed regularly, and that they reflect the needs of the child at the time that the care is being provided. Other risks.
Would you expect a sleep risk assessment for every child in a centre-based service?
Best practice would be that you've had those conversations even in a centre-based service, because each child's needs are individual, and the law and regulations do say that it's appropriate to the sleep and rest needs of each child. So it would be, and Red Nose certainly suggests, that risk assessments are conducted for each child that has a sleep and rest need in an education and care service. Okay. How you do that and how you maintain that is entirely up to you. I guess in family daycare setting, you've got a smaller number of children, so that's something that could possibly be easily but
you've only got the one educator to do all these risk assessments too.
Yeah, that's true. That's where your coordination unit and your families come into play as well. Okay,
so what innovative ways have you seen that some people control risks in family daycare?
Yep. I guess there's lots of different innovative ways that people are controlling risk. So I guess I didn't actually finish my risk question. If we can just
go back to that.
Sorry, Lisa, because I was just going to add there as well that risks for potential emergencies need to be specific to the educator's residence. So that's a common thing that we come across. It's okay to have some things that might be standard or generic across different residences, but there's going to be stuff that's specific. So an educator in a rural or remote area that has access to dams, their risk assessment where snakes are something that is a real possibility, is going to look very different to a unit or a townhouse in a metropolitan city. So it's just about having a look at those risk assessments and making sure they're specific to that individual educator. Shared driveways, school zones and things like that create extra risk at certain times of the day with increased traffic. So it's just considering those kind of things when you're developing your risk plans around emergencies for educators. The other thing I'd say with managing risk is just that it's physical, how important your physical checks are in the day before children come into care. So just making sure again that it's a good thing to identify risk. So sometimes people think, it's going to look bad on me if I identify a risk. It's actually a really proactive thing. So we would actually encourage people to write them on their home safety checklist, to write them in their visit records and say, this is what we found and this is what we've done to mitigate it, so that we can make sure that we can prevent the risk or reduce it or mitigate it moving forward. So don't shy away from that you found a risk.
Look, I love thinking of all the weird and wacky risks that are out there. I once had to do a risk assessment for an emergency evacuation down a staircase with a whole with a group of office people as well as children. And so I considered the risk of that one of those office people was a pedophile. Now it's an unlikely risk, but I built that into the risk management plan because it's a possibility. Not a very high one, I hope, but it is a possibility.
Yeah, we do hope that's not a high one, but just the ones that are practical to you as well. It doesn't need to be an exhaustive list. We don't want people doing, hundreds of pages of risk assessment. It just needs to be practical. It needs to be useful, and it needs to be purposeful for what you're trying to do. And I think that's the key with documentation. How do we work smarter, not harder, because it doesn't have to equal the same thing. So just make sure whatever your documentation is, that it's meaningful and purposeful for what you're trying to achieve. To your next question about innovative ways, there's lots and lots. I guess some of the really easy innovative ways that I've seen recently, and probably in the last few years, is just around the application of apps and software. So technology is just, for everyone, is just extending every day. So there's apps and software that can monitor expiry dates of qualifications, medications. They can send you alerts and reminders. So some of those things I've seen services really embrace, as well as being able to communicate in real time with their educators through some of those apps, which is can be really helpful when educators are notifying that they're sick, or indeed the children are sick, or they're not providing care on a certain day. So just, I'd say, don't be afraid of technology and how it might be able to enhance the connections you have with your children and your families and your coordination unit. The other thing I'd say in terms of any innovation or any strategies that people look to put in place, just don't forget the action part of it. So often we have all these great ideas, but without being able to put it in action, it's just an idea. So, define the purpose, look at what the strategies are that you're wanting, ensure they're effective, review them regularly to ensure that they continue to meet your needs as an educator for your children and your service, because they're unique in each setting. So that's what I would say in terms of innovation. And always a little bit of a plug there, Lisa. Check out our website, as well as the Family Daycare New South Wales website. There's lots of information around.
So look, in residences, what are the risks that services, you keep calling them the old name of coordination unit, but we try and use the word services now, need to be checking before they take a new educator on?
Yeah, so there's lots of things a service can check before they take on a new educator. Certainly the physical premises is a minimum requirement under Regulation 116. So that's to check the physical parts of the approved learning spaces. But in addition to that, things such as the educator's age, the qualifications, the experience of the educator, whether they're going to have an educator assistant, past employee history and previous non-compliance. So you could, where that's applicable, you could ask for references, you could ask to talk to the previous service if that's part of your service's policies and procedures, because we know some educators do move between services. So you might want to know as much information about the educator as you can before you take them on, the nature of the care that they're going to provide. So that's a really important one, and whether that meets the needs of your service as well. So if you're a service that has predominantly children in before and after school care, or predominantly in the middle of the day, or a mixture, which is what we see most often, is a mixture of care types, whether overnight and weekend care is something that your service is able to support as well. So there are considerations when looking at or engaging an educator, or the main things such as, you're working with children checks, your police checks. A lot of services will do an assessment of knowledge. So they'll do a bit of an interview with the educators. They'll assess their knowledge of the law and regulations, and what supports that the educator is looking for from their service, because that's important as well, that the service and the educator are able to meet each other's needs and in turn meet the needs of the children. Some services we've seen do employee declarations, and obviously things such as first aid, and all the other qualifications that go with being able to provide.
What would the employee declarations have?
Yeah, so sometimes I've seen declarations that ensure there's no enforceable actions or undertakings in place, that the educator hasn't had any prohibition notices, or that they haven't had any non-compliance under the national law and regulations in relation to the prospective educator. So some services do that. That's an individual choice, but I guess what you're looking for is as much information as you can in terms of being able to assess the educator to see if they're a good fit for your service and whether your service is a good fit for the educator. So it goes both ways.
And what about actual residences? Like, what are the things that they're really checking in residences? You know, like what kind of safety issues, I suppose, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, certainly all your physical environments. So the indoor and outdoor space. So in the outdoor space, things such as swimming pools, spas, water hazards, fencing, as well as your indoor spaces. So what are the indoor spaces? Bathrooms, kitchens, inaccessible? Do they have the safety latches? So Regulation 116 lists a whole long list of things to consider when it comes to the physical environment for both the indoor and the outdoor environments.
Okay, great. Can I just ask, given that we've got someone who's so in touch with family daycare, we're noticing more and more people are posting on Pinterest and stuff like that, pictures of their family daycare, which is now run out of a separate space within their house. Is that happening more and more, in your opinion, or?
People posting more?
No, rather than using the whole of the house to provide family daycare, they're providing like a playroom or a workshop out the back of their house or something.
I would have to say the learning spaces are the approved learning spaces. So it would be rare that the entire house would be an approved learning space for most educators, because there's things such as their bedrooms and things that they don't probably want as part of their family daycare residence. Some people have, more than one bathroom, so they just have one bathroom that's designated as part of the family daycare. I would say that most people have their own family daycare set up to meet their needs and the needs of their children and their families. So for them, it might mean 2 or 3 spaces in their home. It might mean larger areas. It really is an individual choice based on what's going to work for the educator and their family in their home setting. So it's not a real one-shop answer there. Sorry, Lisa.
Okay, no problems. Well, thank you for that. I must admit it's a bit daunting when you hear everything that, is of risk. So I hope that people aren't, depressed at the end of this. I hope they feel that they can actually manage to look at those risks and deal with them appropriately.
Yeah, and I think it's about getting started and going, okay, what are my risks and what can I do about them, and working with your services to be able to have those conversations. So don't think you have to solve all the world's problems in one day. Just take one at a time and focus on what are your priorities and work with your service around meeting those needs and meeting the requirements under the law and regulations to mitigate and minimise risk for children.
Okay, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everyone.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully that conversation was really interesting. And one of the things that we want to do now is investigate some of the things that Jenny spoke to Lisa about. You can see that there's quite a number of things that were identified there. And as Lisa said, I hope it's not too daunting for you to think about all of those different risks, but it is sometimes helpful to take a little moment to think about which ones might be relevant for you and which ones you think might be particularly things that you might take a bit of notice of because of the circumstances or the setting that is related to your family daycare. So what we want to do now is just look at those main risks that Jenny talked about and just make sure that we sort of identify them so we know what we're talking about. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we might go about mitigating some of those risks. So the first one was physical environment. So the physical spaces. Now, the physical environment, of course, looks like your home. And as Jenny said, there's a couple of places, you're more likely to be identifying particular parts of your home that are available for family daycare. And of course, it's in your home and communities that you're part of that conversation. So it's in your home, but also the neighbourhood, the park down the road and other aspects of your local community. Now, everyday physical environments can potentially be risky for children, which is one of the reasons we take a look at it. And if you take a little minute to have a look at some of the things that might be a risk in this picture, it sort of looks like a very ordinary sort of kitchen area, dining room area, but there's quite a number of things that a family daycare educator who was thinking about risk might identify. So let's think about the different things that you can see straight away on there. And I'm just going to show you a bit of an image about some of the things that I particularly have noticed. You can see here that they're in some of these round circles we've identified particular things, plastic bags, especially for young children. So this risk of suffocation. There's also balloons, which maybe are not dangerous when they're blown up, but when they don't have air in them, they potentially are a risk of suffocation. The cord on the blind and the curtain, they are indeed risks, and most now curtains have a blind cord that is attached to the wall to help mitigate that. Again, you might have some of those things, or you might need to address those things and because they're at risk of strangulation. Cleaning products, I've talked a little bit about that. They're definitely a risk to children, and most family daycare educators, of course, will be storing them in a safe location. Trip hazards with cables on the ground there. And of course, the conversations around food. And I know some of you have been having these conversations around grapes and the way that they're cut. And you'll remember that some of the conversations you've had, I'm sure, have been making sure that you cut the grape down the middle lengthways, not across, because we're wanting to try and reduce the circumference or the diameter of the grape so that it doesn't not a risk for choking in a child's windpipe. The heater and the light might also be risks. So everything in that space might potentially be risks. As Lisa said in the video, some of those things are really easily managed and easily taken care of. But it's also just about having an eye out for some of those physical risks and thinking about what they might look like in your particular setting. As you prepare to take children in family daycare, maybe you're new to family daycare, you might look around that space and really try to minimise those risks so that they're ready to go every single time when you're welcoming children into that space. And if you regularly go to some places within your local community, you'll get much better at being able to identify the potential risks in those spaces. So physical risks are one of the first ones that we heard Jenny mention. And then, of course, we've got health and medical conditions. So looking after children with very specific medical conditions, like something like at risk of anaphylaxis. So a good example of that is also something that you've talked about in this series before. And thinking about the other last two PDs in your pocket, you'll be very aware that preparing food and minimisation plans for children with medical conditions, anaphylaxis is required under the law and the regulations. And they're very real risks for children within family daycare, managing things like diabetes or risks of anaphylaxis, particular allergies, asthma, etc. So a number of different things which no doubt families have told you about on enrolment, and it's a good question to ask those things, which is one of the reasons you're required to do risk minimisation plans and required to have quite robust conversations with families about how you can make sure children are safe. You might be filling in an individual plan for those children, medical plans, etc., all part of the expectations of running a family daycare service within your home. Again, something that you might be called to talk to your nominated supervisor at your service or your educational leader about how you might go about that process on enrolment and to manage that throughout the times that children are with you. Of course, emergencies and evacuations are opportunities, and you heard Lisa talk a little bit about the evacuation process. There's emergencies and evacuations are both places where the children potentially might be at risk in your everyday work in family daycare. The processes will require us to be mindful of what could happen to children as they evacuate or as they are part of an emergency. I know that some family daycare educators actually go do a lot of work with individual children to know what to do in an emergency. The children are very empowered to be able to do that, particularly if something might happen to you, and that we need careful planning to be a part of that. What might children do in that circumstance? And also planning for emergencies and evacuations is a task that needs consideration over a regular period of time. Evacuations and practicing evacuations need to be practiced often so that children build their confidence, and us to think about what an evacuation might look like, where are the processes we need to support children to learn their strategies more and more, can we help them to learn what to do in particular circumstances. So we do want children to be full participants in this sort of process. So they're all opportunities where we have a way to support children, and we also require us to think through what equipment and resources we might take with us, how we might support children to, as I said, participate in that process. So thinking a little bit about the evacuation and emergency processes that you have in place. Excursions and transport is something that is definitely on the radar in family daycare and across early childhood education. And some of you may be aware of some of the things that most recently changed in this space. Transportation of children is something that many family daycare educators do on a very regular basis in cars, on public transport. Some of you are in that space, and also lots of you are transporting children on foot. So your pedestrians in your community. It's important to note that there are clear guidelines about transporting children, and the transportation of children does come with extra risk. And it depends on where you go and how you do it. You will need to map out those processes through risk assessments, and we need to manage that process so that you're really clear about that process. These risks apply equally to single trip or multiple trips or regular trips to the same location. So we also need authorizations for transportations. So authorizations for children needs to be given by a parent or a person who is named on the child's enrolment form, and to give you authority to transport the children. That authorization must state some of the information that I'm going to outline. So it's going to be the child's name, the reason for the transportation. So it might be going to pick up another child or to drop a child off at another service, for example, where and when the child is to be transported. If the authorization is not a regular opportunity, so you're going to a one-off event, then the date of the time that the child will be transported, the time, the description of the proposed pickup location and destination, how you're going to get there. So it could be in a public transport or your own car, for example, the period of time that the child will be transported, and any anticipated anticipated number of children that will be transported, and the number of staff members. That's you, maybe someone else from the service might come along with you, who will accompany the children, or anybody else who's also works alongside you, any requirements for seat belts. So you can see there's a long list here, and depending on each jurisdiction where you are, depending on which state and territory, might be some additional requirements. What the risk assessment has been prepared and is available in the education and care setting, and the written policies and procedures are also available and are implemented that relate to particular transportation of children. All of this information is available on the ACEQA, Australian Children's Education and Care Quality Authority, and also some of the reference points in your booklet, and also on the New South Wales Department of Education website. So check those things out. Ask your nominated supervisor, ask the team at your family daycare service, because some of those things might be tricky to remember, but go and have a look at those if you're not sure about it. And they are also quite well detailed in the guide to the National Quality Standard. Another one that we mention here too is that child protection. And of course, every one of us wants to make sure that children are kept safe. Every child has a right to be safe. Abuse and neglect are very real and can happen to any child. Adults who care for and educate young children have an obligation to look out for the signs of abuse and neglect and to take measures to address them. And again, under the National Education and Care regulations and the law, an approved provider must ensure that policies and procedures are in place to make sure that we keep children safe. And that's a really important part of our obligation, and that there's timely and effective ways that we can identify and respond to children who may be at risk or experiencing abuse and neglect. So something that I know many of you have done some training around this, so you've got much clearer about your obligations and who to call if you are feeling worried about that. Again, it might be as in the first instance, talking to a field officer or some of your people from your service, your nominated supervisor, for example, but making sure that you're clear about the policies and procedures in that space. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. Work health and safety, of course, is another one that's really important. And I know that many of you really are thinking lots more about work health and safety. I know a long time ago when I started in early childhood, we didn't really think about it, but now we think about it much, much more. And we actually give you, hopefully, induction processes where you actually start to identify things like manual handling, how to manage any stresses. You might have employee assistance programs that you might be able to access. things to make sure that you're safe from slips and trips and falls and any injuries that are caused by aggressive or unpredictable people, including children. So we need to be able to think, what do we do in those situations? So risk management is not just about protecting children, it's also about protecting you and protecting families, for example, who might come to your home. So it's generally about thinking about everybody who's part of this process. Now, here's one that you all know about, COVID, and we want to make sure that COVID is not something that that poses a really significant risk into the future, but something that we can manage. So we know that many of you have also had COVID, and you may well get it again, and children may at this point also get COVID. But early childhood education and care settings and outside school hour settings, including and really trying to think a lot about what they might do in this situation. So we're definitely at a higher risk because lots of children bring in lots of germs in that space. But I know that many of you are doing lots of things to make sure that those things are managed more clearly. And we also have close interactions with children, which puts us a little bit more risk. And children are less likely to have serious illness from COVID, but they still can transmit the virus. So we need to be aware of some of those things. And of course, we're taking simple steps and measures, as we know, is something that we can do within the context of our family daycare settings to avoid COVID and to manage those things as we proceed. Another one, of course, that we talked about, and we heard Jenny refer to it, is sleep risks. And we know that you've all been thinking quite a lot about this. Ensuring the children are safe in their sleeping environment is a really important obligation for all of us who work in early childhood education. And we want to be tuning into Red Nose, who's our leading authority in Australia, who gives us the information we need about safe sleep and SIDS prevention. And we're here to make sure that we do as much as we possibly can to implement safe sleeping practices. And so we heard Jenny refer to some of the things which are not appropriate in terms of children's sleep. So check that you know what you're doing in that context, and we'll talk a little bit more in that space. And of course, many of you have actually accessed some of these things through the PD in your pocket opportunity. So if you haven't had a look at that, check that out. And of course, go and check out Red Nose as the leading authority, because there's a lot of information there, and we'll talk a little bit more about tips. And again, the department's website has quite a lot of information about how to minimise sleep risks to babies, and make sure that there's, I think it's topic 7, and the website for Red Nose, which has got quite a lot of information on it. So what are we going to do next in this space? We're going to identify the process around risk management, and we're going to make sure that we are thinking about risk assessment. So in a document that's really very easy to use on the ASEQA website is a really good step-by-step process around managing risk and understanding how we identify risk and how we manage it. And it's like some steps, which I think are really helpful. Now, if you've not been through a process like this, because I know that some of you haven't, this might be a really good way to start this process. And you might want to write some of these down. You might want to go back and have a look at the document, which is about risk management and thinking about risk on the ASEQA website. So really good resources there. So there are 5 steps. First, you identify the hazard or potential hazard. So you're looking around for things that you think might be risky for children, things that we just did then in terms of having a look at some of the things that might be harmful to children. Then you assess the risk of harm. So you think, well, is it likely to happen or unlikely to happen? What's the situation there? Then you manage the risk, and you think about what sort of strategies you can use to manage your risk. So you're looking at practice, things that you can put into place, including work health and safety strategies and well control measures. And then you evaluate the current risk or potential of harm. How well is it being eliminated or managed? Look at an alternative if that's not working. So lots of reflective practice here, and reviewing and ongoing monitoring for the risk and potential harm, so that you know whether things are low risk or high risk. And if they're high risk, we need to make sure that we're vigilant, we're scanning, we're assessing, we're looking all the time to make sure we're checking to see. And some of things like checklists and things like that are really helpful tools here. So this process is really helpful, and it's only got 5 key steps, so pretty easy to remember. And there's some great tools on the ASEQA website that help this process. So just before we keep going, it's helpful to think about the difference between minimising risk and managing risk. So essentially, every risk has 2 ways of controlling it. So we can either minimise it or in some cases eliminate it, or we can manage it. So we take it away or really reduce it, or we manage it. So say, for example, an excursion, and you did a risk assessment following those steps, identify that you needed to cross a very busy road. To go a longer route would mean that you had no road crossings. So choosing to go the longer route with no crossings means that you would have eliminated the risk of being hit or coming into contact with a very busy street. But also you might also want to manage the risk by helping to support children to cross at the lights and teach them some of the strategies around road safety education. So noticing that maybe that a child had left their bag on the floor and identifying that as a trip hazard and getting the child to put it away in the safe space is eliminating the risk. And you might do this on a daily basis. Managing the risk, you might identify a risk that you can't eliminate, but you want to work out ways to make it less likely that it causes a major impact. So, for example, you could avoid crossing the road, as I said before, and go on an excursion, but you decided to take another adult with you to help you control the risk when you're going across a very busy street. Perhaps you've got to wait in the middle of the road, or you might walk to a place where you can cross the road a little bit more safely. So it's just thinking about whether you're going to minimise or hopefully eliminate in some cases, or manage it when you get it. And this is also going back to our conversation around bubble wrap. We don't want to bubble wrap children so they never experience it. We want to make sure that we either minimise it or eliminate it, or in fact, in some cases, really support children to manage the risk that's a situation that they're in. So what's helpful now, and again, we'd love to hear your questions as you're progressing, so make sure you're putting a few of those into the chat as we go. But think about how we can actually manage those risks or minimise them. So we've got a few suggestions here for each of the things that we've talked about. There's lots of different ideas here, but I just want to highlight some of these things. So in the physical environment, for example, it's things like daily checks and weekly checks, and perhaps with your coordinator or your field officer, you might want to have do a quarterly check. You do regular sleep checks, you put guards on heaters, you remove a hazard from an outside area, you do a check, you might do a check with children. And of course, you do critical reflection on a daily basis to make sure that you're thinking about the things that might potentially pose a risk to some children on some days and other children on a different day. So trying to think about all those processes and strategies, things like safety checks that help you to be able to manage some of that physical environment risk. Then, of course, we have medical conditions and health conditions. So knowing your policy is really important, discussing the health and medical issues with families, developing a medical management plan, supporting documentation that you've got filed and clearly there, a risk minimisation plan. You might have a spare EpiPen. You might have a medical management backpack that you've got all sorted. So lots of different strategies. If you've got a really good idea, we'd love to hear about some of those ideas as well in the chat. You also might offer an opportunity for risk minimisation in emergencies and evacuation. So you might have a plan. So you might map out a very clear plan. You might actually involve children in that plan. You might act it out with children before you go on your emergency or your evacuation practice. Practicing your evacuation plan more often. You have a fire blanket and a fire extinguisher helps you to minimise the risk. Practicing lockdown, practicing lockout drills. You might also support children to get to know, as I said before, what to do in an emergency. I know if you've got older children in your program, perhaps in school holidays, supporting them to know how to call 000 is a really good thing to help children to do, not only in your home, but generally in their lives. Child protection, it's about completing working with children checks for you and for your family members, something that I know your service will help you do. Knowing the policy, attending the training, and really thinking about protective behaviours education for young children, you know, knowing how to speak up and what to do when they feel uncomfortable. So some of those really good strategies there. Again, lots of resources and materials available there. Of course, work health and safety, it's about knowing your policies again. So policies are really definitely part of that, asking about your policies, knowing the right manual handling techniques, lifting and carrying, managing stress levels, seek out help when you need it, sitting in adult-sized chairs and not carrying children for too long is something that you can do to minimise the risk. Excursions and transport, knowing again the policy, making sure that there's installation checks. And again, love to hear from you if you've got some really good strategies here. I think someone's just put in the chat here, there's some really good ways of practicing drills and making sure that the children know how to unlock the mobile, Karen. That's a really good strategy. So really sort of supporting children to be able to know some of those things so that they don't, they know how to do it, and you start to minimise the risk that's in that process. So evacuation packs, really helpful in lots of different circumstances. They might be really helpful in a really quick place. You can grab them and go and help children to remember some of those things as well. Not that we're asking children to take the responsibility in that, but we're helping children to be really able to manage their own risks and keep other children safe as well. Practicing road safety, thinking about how you look out for driveways. So lots of great information here around that process, and lots of you have been putting different ideas in the chat, so keep going with those because I think they're really interesting. If you've got your own lots of different ways that you minimize risk, we'd love to hear about those things, because I think practice ideas from practitioners, family daycare strategies from family daycare educators really help. So and of course COVID, lots of different strategies that you're really good at now. Mask wearing, spending lots of time outside. Lots of you will have done this already. Making sure your indoor and outdoor spaces, your indoor spaces are well ventilated. Keeping up your own immunisation and practicing regular hand washing is really important too. So just lots of really good hygiene practices. And some of you have really done a great job of this in the last little while, and making sure that children are really skilled at that process. So those are really fantastic opportunities. And I think Christine just in the chat is saying that she's got a first aid kit and in a tackle bag. So it's really portable. That's a really good idea too. So love to hear some more of those suggestions because something that can be easily grabbed and really quickly taken out and about is really good, or taken to where it's needed. So regular hand washing and all the really good things that you're doing in this. And in fact, our hygiene practices are probably really developed during COVID, which is fantastic. Now, of course, you already know about sleep risks, because sleep risks are something that you've all been thinking about, but it is a bit concerning to hear that still sometimes in family daycare, children are not sleeping safely. So I really encourage you to go into this, the PD in your pocket, I think number 7, and have a look at that, because a really important opportunity for you to see some great ideas that come from Red Nose, and also to go into some of the information that's available on the department's website. So really important there to have a think about what you're doing at the moment. Talk to your service, talk to your nominated supervisor, ask for help if you're not sure, and remember some of these really key ideas. There's some really good strategies that are available through those websites and links that we mentioned. And I just want to highlight some of them. Location. Where are children sleeping? Adequate light and ventilation, so you can keep an eye on them. Always making sure that children are on their back. Babies are on their back and their babies' faces are uncovered, and no toys or anything else in the cot. And making sure that there's a safe cot, safe mattress, safe bedding, and a safe sleeping bag. And if you're in any doubt about this, please ask someone and make sure that you are doing this in a really safe way, because none of us wants to be in a situation where children are put at risk. So it's good to just practice some of those things. Yeah, a great question here, Karen. We'll come back to that. She's asking about practicing lockdown without scaring the children. So we might come back to that question and see whether we can manage to have a bit of a conversation about that at the end of our conversation. So everybody, what we need to do now is we think about the risk assessment process. So again, some really good information available on the ASEQA website, and hopefully within your service too, some really good conversations that can be happening there. I would really encourage you all to be a part of that and increasingly include children in that process. So risk minimisation plans for children with specific medical conditions. This is what's required of you within family daycare. The regulations demand these and require you to undertake this. A risk assessment as part of an emergency planning, excursion risk minimisations. You heard Jenny talk about that. Regular excursion risk assessments, transportation risk assessments, regular transportation risk assessments, the ones you're going on a daily basis, and also risk assessments in your residences. So that's particular to family daycare, so that you're looking at what's in your own residence so that you can manage those risks. Pets and things like that. Some of you have particular guidelines that you, and of course, all of you who are joining us tonight will have been a part of those assessments on your residences as you have joined family daycare. And thanks so much for the people who are chatting away in the chat and sharing ideas. This is a great tool that I really want to encourage you to have a look at. It's the Risk Assessment and Management Tool from ASEQA. It helps family daycare educators to understand the importance of assessing and managing risk. Now, it's quite a comprehensive document, but what I would suggest you dip in and out of it and you have a conversation with your nominated supervisor and the team that you work with so that you can use it in a really helpful way. You can download it. The link is here. But if you go to the ASEQA website and type in risk assessment and management tool, you will find it along with a whole range of other resources, including this, this document or this table, which is embedded in this, which gives you a sense of how to calculate the risk and the situation that you might find yourself in. So one of the most helpful ways is to understand and manage the risk by using a risk matrix, which is what this is. And it can be a little bit tricky to understand, but let's have a little think about what it might look like. So if you think about this, it's really helpful because it's got some really good color coding, and it's helpful to have a look at it. It's on page 20 of that document that I just mentioned. So essentially, it's got two factors in it: the likelihood of something happening and the consequences of that happening. And the likelihood is across the top and the consequences are down the side. So likelihood, rare, unlikely, possible, likely, most certain, or likelihood, major. So the consequences, major consequence, significant, moderate, minor, insignificant. So yes, I agree. Lots of you are saying it's a great resource. So make sure you check it out, everybody. So you look at the actual risk, say, of children getting into a bedroom in your house and finding some Panadol in the bedside table. The likelihood of that happening, so some of us would say unlikely because you've got that area is locked. And for the purposes of this, let's say that it is possible. So we've got a door handle that is possible for children to get in. What would a consequence be? Well, it's major. Is it major? Is it something that we should think about? Now, Panadol is a poison and it's hard to reverse. So we would need to make sure that there's a likelihood of a major consequence. And so that would be in the red zone. So we want to say it's a major thing that would require probably maybe children to be hospitalised. So we would need to think about immediate action. So we might put the Panadol in a locked cupboard or lock the bedroom door. That's about managing that risk. So we might look at another one, children getting access to a fruit bowl, which is on top of your kitchen bench. Is it likely? Well, no, because the bench is quite high, but they could drag a chair. So maybe it's a little bit likely. So what's likely? So it might be unlikely to happen. But what happens if it did? Then it might be minor because they might eat 3 bananas. So eating 3 bananas is probably going to fill them up. They might feel a little bit sick in their tummy, but it's not going to be a major risk, and you're probably going to be there very quickly when you see children eating those. So a risk is a major consequence that is most certainly to occur, and that's marked in the red zone. And if it's in the yellow zone, it's very low or insignificant and very rare. So we've got to figure out where this might be. Is it got major consequences or insignificant consequences? Is it rare or is it most certain to happen? So we need to think about those sorts of things in every situation that you might potentially find yourself. So it's and so again, some great conversations that are happening about the types of strategies you're doing. So Katrina has identified that all medication is in a double locked cupboard. So she's obviously identified there that medication and availability is something that is a consequential risk. So if children did get access to it, it's consequential. And so they're making sure that their risk is lowered and mitigated and minimised by putting those medications behind a locked door, which reduces the risk to rare because you'd have to go through 2 locks to get that. So that's a really good example. Thank you very much for that. And it's just about being a bit clever too sometimes, and just sharing ideas. So saying, well, a double lock is actually a really good idea. So I lock the cupboard, then I maybe lock the door. So there's two ways to mitigate those strategies. So obviously there are really good ways of thinking about that. So I think, Alina, you've asked a question about Panadol in the fridge. So we might come back to that as we go. Some of you might be able to know that. But again, you would need to go through the same thing. We put the Panadol in the fridge. Is it, what's the consequences of children getting access to that? And are they likely to getting access to that? So those sorts of conversations are really important. And here's the table that's also available. It's in the risk assessment and management tool. And I think it's a really good way of thinking of what's the activity. Have we defined the hazard? What's the risk assessment? We use the matrix, then we eliminate or control who is going to do it and by when. So something really simple like this that helps us to comply with, as it says here, regulation 102C1. So these are really important. It's a way of figuring out how to plan your processes. So there's other really good tools in the toolkit, which is a really good way of planning what you're thinking about. And as we said earlier, you do risk assessments like these, including risk assessment matrix for a range of risks in family daycare, including children with special medical conditions, emergency planning, excursions, transportations, and also for your residents. So really good process. And again, some really good processes and questions. Put the Panadol in a cash box and lock it. So that's a really good ways of thinking about those things. So terrific answers, everybody, and really good ways of thinking. Now, I'd really love to hear any of you who have involved children in risk management, because there's a great tool also on their SQL website where children can be involved in a risk assessment process. Terrific for children who are a bit older. There's one for children over the age of 5 and one for children under the age of 5, and really helping them to feel a sense of control over their actions and consequences of their behaviours, and also for the situations that they might find themselves. Not that they are going to be given full responsibility. That is not appropriate. So we need to take responsibility, but we invite them into that space so they can start to think about the ways that they can keep themselves and other people safe. It's associated with some templates that can assist you and your nominated supervisor, perhaps your educational leader, to think about children as successful and capable and competent, and that there are opportunities to guide children to do their own assessments and to think about that within their own play. So really good opportunities. I'd love to hear if any of you have actually used these risk assessment tools or done some risk assessments with children themselves. It's a really fantastic idea, and actually children really enjoy them. So I would really encourage you to have a bit of a look at that. So we're now talking a lot about the ways that we think about managing risk broadly, but what about risky play? So listening to tonight's session, you could get the feeling that risk is really bad, but I do think there's some fantastic opportunities for risk to be incorporated into play. And so if you pick up the guide from the National Quality Framework, you'll see that instead of trying to eliminate everything, we want to maintain a level of opportunities for risky play for children to be a part of that. It can be acceptable when it's a benefit to children's learning, and that they really enjoy that space and they can grow in that space. So it tells us that risks can be managed through conducting risk assessments like we've been talking about, weighing up the obligations, looking at the risk matrix, and thinking about the foreseeable risk to harm, and thinking about the benefits that children are engaging with in that play environment. So why is this important, and why do we need to make an exception for the types of risky play? So not eliminating all of that. It's because children cannot learn without taking some risk. So we all learn through those processes, and we want to be able to think about how we can help children to do this in a safer way as possible. So offering those opportunities is going to be really interesting. And some of you I know have done this by giving children opportunities to take little risks within the context of your family daycare home, but also outside and out and about in your community. So risky play enables children to learn how to do their own risk assessments, as I've been talking about. Research has shown that children who engage in risky play are less likely to become injured, because they are really adept at observing their own surroundings and deciding whether something is too high or unsafe, and it helps them to regulate their emotions And it also helps with self-esteem, taking on new risks and boosting your confidence. And it helps you to take initiative and build that sense of agency that we talk about in early childhood education. It puts children in a situation where they can assess their own risks and their potentials, what they're scared of or worried about, and then what to do in those situations. It helps with physical development, so running and climbing and all those sorts of things that really stretch children's physical capabilities. It's something also that helps children to learn about failure and how to deal with failure if something doesn't go right, and also to develop really rich social skills. So lots of different reasons why risky play is a fantastic opportunity for children to learn and grow. And those of you who haven't quite got there yet, be thinking, what does that mean? It could be children in a tree, climbing a tree. It could be using a knife within the context of your family daycare as you set up for morning tea, a knife that is sharp. So what do you do about that? Learning how to use a knife is a really good process. You might use particular knives because they are safer than other knives. So it's about figuring out what the acceptable risk is. Make sure you talk to families about those things as you proceed to. It's the job of all educators to assess and manage the levels of risk so that children are given the chance to stretch themselves and test their abilities, and making sure that they know what is an unacceptable risk and how they manage the risks that are around them. If we don't provide controlled opportunities for children to take risks, then they might be denied the chance to do it, and then they won't know how to do it when they get older. And we know that the benefits of risky play are about making sure that children get the opportunities. But we also make sure that we want to prevent children from being injured. So we need to be really aware of that, and we need to be supporting them in those contexts. We also need to make sure that we are supporting children to have growing abilities as they get bigger and bigger. And we don't want to underestimate their skills, but we also want to make sure that they are safe. And of course, children have got less experience than educators, and so therefore we have a really important role in scaffolding and supporting those children. And thanks for the ideas that are coming through on the chat too, really, really helpful. So it's important to give children appropriate and managed environments so that they can learn about risk. And it's important that you introduce risk gradually. So you find a good balance between supervision and offering children some opportunities to take a little risk. And obviously, if you're a baby, you work with babies, the risk will be different to the risk that you might have for an 8-year-old who's with you in the school holidays. And research also tells us that it's great to have discussions with children initially about how to take a risk before that involves a risk. So this probably goes to the question that people were having about lockdown. You practice lockdown, but you don't want to scare them. So you want to talk to children about that before you practice. You want to talk to children about things before you practice. So the good news is that we have now a video with a great interview with Lisa and Robyn Monro Miller about risky play. And Robyn is a great advocate for risky play, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about that process. And so I'll leave it with Lisa and Robyn to share some new stories and new ideas about that space. Make sure you keep your questions coming in the chat because they're really great, and we might come back to some of those after we hear from Robyn and Lisa.
I'm really excited tonight to have Robyn Monro Miller with me, who I've known for a number of years, but haven't spoken to for a long time. Robyn, you're a play expert. Tell me what makes you a play expert.
Well, the term play expert, I'm not overly comfortable with. I think I prefer to call myself a play advocate. And I'm an advocate for play because I believe it's so critical to healthy human development. And I think play is the process by which we actually learn to navigate the complexity of life. And if we are not actually encouraging play for our children and encouraging opportunities for play, then we really are in a sort of at a disadvantage as a community, as a society. So expert doesn't sit well with me.
Okay, look, I love being an advocate of many things, so I'll cope with an advocate.
Yeah. Well,
You've got some formal roles though, haven't you?
I do, and my passion for advocacy has led me on a sort of on a journey with different organisations who promote play. I'm on the board of Play Australia, and I also am on the board of the International Play Association, and I'm currently president of the International Play Association.
Cool. That sounds important. I didn't even know there was a play association.
There is, and it's 61 years old, so it's got a very long, distinguished history with membership across 52 countries.
Okay, so look, you've got to answer this question, you know?
Mhm.
1 minute family daycare educators are being told that they have to abide by a million regs, you know, to ensure the safety of every child in family daycare. And the next minute they're being told that they should engage in risky play. And it's really hard to get your head around that 1 minute you're wrapping children up in cotton wool and the next minute you're saying, no, go out there and climb that thing unaided. What's that all about?
And I think, you know, some people see it as a contradiction, but I actually don't. And the reason is that when we talk about risky play, we're not necessarily talking about harm. And what the regulations and the guidelines are all about are protecting children from harm. And people immediately, an adult perception, when you hear risk, you think harm. And the reality is risk is something that takes you outside your comfort zone. Risk is about uncertainty and unpredictable, and what's unpredictable. It doesn't mean you're out of control. And it doesn't mean if you take a risk, you're going to get harmed. And I think that's where in our head we get quite concerned. We say, but we can't because we're not allowed to because of all these risks. We're not allowed to take risks. And then we see the risk as something that is inevitably going to result in harm. So I just think it's about our language. And so I like to think of risky play as child-led adventure play, and I know where this term risky play came from. It actually started back in the UK. The introduction of the term risky play was to actually make sure that people understood play, the importance of play and risk, and tried to desensitize people to it. But I don't necessarily think it's had that effect. And people are sort of talking about that as, does that actually help with our modern day understanding of play? So I think if you're thinking about this from your perspective of regulations, just remember that what you're trying to do is encourage children to step outside their comfort zone. And that means it's challenging children to take on their own emotional and physical risks and test their own ability and limits. It's no different to the play that used to always happen. We just suddenly have given it called the title risky play. But it's pretty normal behaviour of children.
Okay, so let's make it really clear to me. If I'm in a family daycare and I'm looking at something and you are next to me, and they're engaging in risky play, what would we be seeing?
Okay. Well, I suppose if I was in family daycare, I would be looking at, I'd be seeing children who are testing their skills. So they would basically be involved in balancing or climbing. They wouldn't have an adult hovering. An adult would be at a sort of a safe distance, but, watching them and checking on them. They would be exploring. They would be maybe building things, making things with loose parts, testing things out. They would be being challenging themselves internally, as to, will this fit together? Will that fit together? That, and in the natural environment, you see children quite often sort of undertaking what people might consider is risky play by climbing over boulders, climbing up trees, or trying to climb up sort of different sort of ledges. So that is what I would be seeing in a family daycare situation. But the other thing I'd be seeing, and I'd like people to remember, and it's frequently not covered, is that not all play has to be physically challenging. There is also an emotional risk to play. And I think that's often a very neglected area where people talk about risk in play and they don't think about, and researchers rarely cover that emotional risk. So in that context, educators I'd see would not be immediately stepping in to manage a situation. They would allow for children to have some disagreement, where children, they would even allow at times some temporary exclusion of children by other children, because there's this emotional risk that children take when they're playing. So that you can scaffold that, of course, and say, well, what will you do next? But it's about the emotional risk children take when they have to re-enter a game and when they have to renegotiate the rules so that they make
And that's often true with family daycare, where you might have a younger child taking the risk of joining in with the older children.
Yes,
that
yeah.
can often be quite hard.
And we don't have to take that younger child over to the older children and say, here, play with them. We can encourage them. What are you going to do? How will you encourage them? How will you go and play with them? If you'd like to, what will you do? Encourage them to take those emotional risks. I think we do too little of that in play. We intervene.
So what are the elements that make play risky?
Okay, well, I would certainly say, actually, if I could go back a bit, Lisa, I need to say one more thing about this family daycare. I think educators need to be careful about the language they use, because that's the other, the language we use can actually give a child a perception that they're not competent and they're not capable. And so a language that which educators will use should be things like, instead of be careful, just saying, let me know if you need help. So instead of sort of warning them all the time, what are you going to, do you think that, how are you going to do that? What will be that problem? So having those questions rather than stop, be careful, and those sorts of things. So I think that will be the other part of the educator's role. When it comes to risky play, and traditionally risky plays largely been recognised in literature as falling into 6 categories. Now, when I read these categories, they scare me, okay? The way they're described, they do, the educator in me, because I come from the out of school hours background, I don't like the way that's phrased. But this is what the literature says. This is how the literature is sort of defining what risky play is. So I think we put our own sort of glasses on and our own lens through that. So the first one is with height. So risky play, they see anything with height. So that can be the monkey bars, the trees. It can be just a large boulder that a child scrambles up onto. It doesn't have to be huge height. Remember, we're not talking adult heights. We're not going, they're not adults. So a height for a small child can be just a minimal height. And it also can be, balancing along a sort of a ledge or a rock can be a height for a child. The second element of risky play is high speeds. And when they describe high speeds, I just do, the adult in me does high speeds, no. But if you remember as kids, going really fast on a bike doesn't mean you're going 60 miles an hour, okay? You only can go as fast as your little legs will pedal, but, going fast, and that's the thing. We keep putting our adult lens on things, doing high speeds, no, high heights, no, because we're thinking from an adult perspective. But high speeds from a child's perspective can be rolling down a hill. Rolling down a hill, and suddenly that was fast. And it might, obviously, if we tried to roll down a hill, I just don't seem to roll anymore. And of course, the third one they talk about with tools. Okay, and we often see children with, they often use woodwork tools as the example. How to scare a whole group of educators, give them really adult-sized hammers and nails, and say this is risky play. Not necessarily. The tools that we can use can be woodwork tools, but all sorts of cooking tools, different bits and pieces of our daily life can be incorporated, and children taught how to use tools. It's not unusual for children of, in sort of under 5-year-olds, 3-4-year-olds, to actually be taught how to use glue guns with supervision. All of those sorts of things are quite risky to a young child, but when someone is there to help them, it's actually scaffolding that behaviour. And I say this is time consuming. The next one is elements. So playing with fire and water and rain, all of those things are seen as a risky play. This one I like. This number 5 in that list of, risky elements is the chance of getting lost. Now, that's the hide and seek. That's the adventures you go on. And once again, it's their perception of being lost, their perception of hiding. We may still be able to see them very clearly, but to them, there's that risk element. And the final one, and the one that often happens and people feel it's some sort of behavioural issue, is rough and tumble play. So rough and tumble play is risk-taking behaviour, but it's one of the most incredible ways of children learning self-regulation, of, learning, play fighting and ball games. They learn self-control. They learn to pick up visual cues. It's a really powerful form of risky play. So they're the 6 categories. And I think those 6 categories, as I said before, they only address physical risk. And within each of those, there will be emotional risk. But I do believe, we've got a bit more to unpack when it comes to play. That's why there's no experts on play. Play is so big and diverse. Which part of play are you going to focus on?
Okay, so I get what the elements are, but how are those things good for children? How is it good for a child to experience height? How is it good for a child to experience speed?
Well, I suppose, look at a broader picture of play in any form is good for kids. It's essential. And the process of play triggers not just the physical responses in the body and physical development, but it also triggers neurological changes. And so when we look at play from a risk perspective and learning like risky play, we have got, and unfortunately a lot of the research is done for good reason on animals but animals play. And so they've monitored this. We see, for example, the rats who playing and rough and tumble behaviour in rats. They've measured it's called a brain-derived neurotropic factor. Don't worry, everybody. There's no tests on this one, but BDNF. But I use this as an example because this is a little-known growth hormone in the brain. And it's through rough and tumble play that this BDNF is triggered and helps grow the brain. And so there are a whole lot of mechanisms happening through particular types of play that actually help develop the brain. And people often think of play as just the physical side, but that's where risky play actually is so beneficial. It's believed that the play actually helps with risk, helps the coping mechanisms and provides children appropriate sort of responses to stress and danger. And some neuroscientists have actually described risky play as what they call is antiphobic. So that, as babies can have this natural fear of, as they're learning things, they don't necessarily breach out and do a lot of new things. But as we grow towards self-autonomy and we get, our own sense of agency, we develop these skills. We take risks to move a little bit further, a little bit more to learn about ourselves. And so when children don't get this opportunity, they can develop phobias like height phobias to height, phobias to all of these different things that we're actually testing, when we talk about those 6 categories. So this idea of risky play or child-led challenging play is around developmentally taking us to that next level as human beings, as adults, to be able to function and to be able to deal with stress and cope with change and uncertainty.
Well, I mustn't have had much risky play as a child because I discovered the other day that I'm very risk averse around children. I was with a family daycare educator and her children, and I was kept going, oh, is she okay? How can people like me that are obviously get very scared when they see children doing things that could conceivably end in an accident, manage their own fears?
Well, firstly,
I think most educators probably aren't as scared as I am, but
and the more you know the child, the less fear you have, and if the more you're working with those children, you know what they're capable of, what's possible, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Adult educators being sensitive to those issues, because if you think about the other end of the spectrum, you don't want those in your family daycare service who just don't care. And I know there's a lot of promotion about, we need to be more relaxed. And I look, that's fine. I agree. But try explaining that when you're an educator with requirements, and when you're an educator that has to explain at the end of the day why that child doesn't look quite the same as they were when they left. That twisted arm or whatever else. So I understand that. And so as an educator, just take a step back and think, okay, what is my level of where's my level of comfort? And one of the things is to do a bit of reflection about that level of comfort. And I would actually encourage you to, when you are sort of trying to sort of see how things are going with play, and you're trying to scaffold some more skill development in, I would say take the extra 5 seconds before you react. And then, once you've left the 5 seconds, maybe you can go 10 seconds. As a child's attempting something, just try to, just do it as gradual. It's a gradual, it's your phobia. You know what I mean? It's your phobia will this child be okay? But if you give a child that extra 5 seconds to keep trying something, that extra 10 seconds, and you're watching them, and obviously I've got to stress here, if you see an imminent danger, if you see harm that is just not acceptable, you must intervene straight away. And I think we've got to get the balance right here. But in those, if the child is balancing along a ledge, and it looks relatively, what's the worst case scenario is could be a skinned knee, then maybe keep letting them balance along that ledge. If the other side of that ledge is a 6-foot drop, then naturally that's just not risky play anymore. Okay, that just would be reckless, and so you'd say no quickly and pull them off. But
in my mind, a 6-inch drop is a 60 feet drop.
Yes, but it's not, and that's the thing. Have a look at the child. The one thing I'd say about children, we often underestimate their capacity. We often think, they can't do that, and they won't generally attempt something they don't think they can't do. They will attempt it and they will stop when their fear kicks in. You want them to learn that fear mechanism. So one of the things I would definitely say as educators, don't try and teach them to break the fear. Don't lift them up onto something. Always allow them, when they're dealing with play equipment, to handle it themselves. And say when a child's trying to get onto a monkey bar or trying to climb onto a piece of play equipment and they can't get on, and they say, help me, and say, look, I'm not going to help you, because that play equipment's specially designed for kids who can get there. And when you're ready, when you can keep trying, when you can get on there, you'll be able to do it. And whilst that's frustrating for the child at the time, the sense of accomplishment that child feels a couple of weeks later when they can do it, it's just the dopamine explosion in the brain. The pride means that they've got that, they're motivated to do it again. They're motivated to know that learning takes time and you can't do everything at once. So I think we can have that role where, provide the opportunities, provide the environment for risk-taking behaviour to happen, but we don't have to push it.
It's sometimes hard in family daycare to provide that environment, though, because you've always got a spot check in your mind of, someone's like, I noticed with this educator I was with the other day, she said, it's okay, when they get on the slack line, it drops below the allowed height. And it was such an instinctive reaction for her to say, I know this is above the required height of 60 centimetres or whatever it is, I've forgotten what it is, for a piece of equipment, but the weight of the child pulls it down. So, sometimes we just make our environments completely sterile and free of risk so that we don't have to justify the height of the slack line.
I think that's where the benefit risk analysis can come in. And for educators who aren't familiar with that, it's been around in the UK since 2002. And that's where you can look at some of the things and look at the risk versus the benefit. Okay, so look at the benefits of, that participation, what's it developing in the child, and how have you managed the risk, how are you managing that risk? I think they're the sorts of things that you need to keep in mind. And if you want more information about that, just Google benefit risk analysis. Kids Safe New South Wales has done a bit of work on benefit risk analysis. So it's not a new concept, it's quite an old one, but it's frequently not used enough. So that educator can explain what they're doing and justify. And that's the important thing, is being able to justify why or how you are doing particular behaviours or practices.
Okay, so some people would be listening to us and saying, okay, I understand the theory, I understand that some risk is good, I understand I should be doing some of it despite all the stuff about, not taking risks that I've learnt to date. But I don't exactly know what it is you're talking about. I can imagine bicycles, I can imagine, can you just give me some ideas of some of the things that make up risky play in a family daycare?
Well, I would definitely say definitely opportunities to go outdoors. Outdoor play is risky play because of what they can discover in the garden and things like that. So, but loose parts, if they haven't explored more about loose parts play is a great way to practice risky play, because it's involved building and putting together things, putting like old sheets, making cubbies and old tires. Obviously you check your tires for no contents inside of creepy crawlies, but those sorts of wood. I mean, in New South Wales we have something called reverse garbage, which people can access sort of a whole lot of different offcuts and different objects like tubes, you name it, big barrels. Being able to have those where children can sort of build and make things, create environments to play, climb on things. That is one way that you're getting those sorts of things of the elements and the chance and the rough and tumble play. So, and also games that allow children to play, rough and tumble games can be another way. There's little ways you can incorporate it into what you're doing with children all the time. And I say for the under fives, I think loose parts is a really great introduction to allow children just to experiment, and that curiosity that comes with.
And when you're talking about loose parts in that kind of a thing, you're talking about outdoor loose parts and quite big ones, aren't you?
Yes, yeah, quite big ones, not the indoor ones.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is if you can have sort of a regular time where you look at what are the local playgrounds in your area that you can go to, because one of the things that many local government areas now are doing is they've got some great playgrounds that have built in what we would call risk, but it's got harm minimization. Okay, they are relatively safe, and I think being able to go and utilize some of those great spaces now is another opportunity where you can get the more physical aspects of play, of that climbing, of finding a height that really works.
Okay, we're going to have to finish, but just tell me, what was your favourite risky play when you were a child?
Well, you see, once again, as a child, I didn't consider it risk, and nobody told me it was risky play, but I absolutely loved the oak tree in my backyard, and I would climb up that oak tree and build unsafe structures in that oak tree. And I remember the very top of the tree, I learned, and so this is horrific. You don't want any, this could make you, if you're risk averse, Lisa, this is going to freak you out. But I remember climbing to the very top of the tree, and it freaks me out when I think about it. And that holding on and realizing at that very point, the wind actually blows you. And it's a bit nerve-wracking. So when I think back to that, I think that was probably one of the narrowest, most unsafe parts of the tree I must have climbed to. But I always remember holding on to me thinking, I think I might have gone too far. I think I need to get back down here, because I could feel the tree moving. So that was mine. What about yours?
Oh, I think it was reading a book outside.
Okay, and that could contribute to that the evidence that research is coming up about that phobia.
Yeah. I was one of those children that I couldn't ride a bike, I couldn't swim, anything physical. I was told I was hopeless at it, so I just gave up. I never tried.
And then once again, that ties in with that language.
Then I did the most riskiest thing of all. I joined the early education and care sector.
and what a beautiful risk.
Well, hello, everybody. It's great that you're able to be with us to hear that great conversation. Lots of thank yous coming through in the chat. So thanks very much, everybody, for highlighting all of that. We are now an opportunity for you to ask some questions about some of the things that you've heard about today. So it sounds like risk and risky play is something that many of you are really interested in, and some of you have got some terrific ideas. There's a really good idea there of actually using some foam mattresses and having them available for rough and tumble play. Great suggestion there in the chat. So great to hear from you directly about any questions. I might just open up the chat and see if I can see a few more of your questions. So let us know anything particularly that struck you. I know that some of you are asking things about, what happens if you want to explore risky play, but you're a bit nervous about maybe what a compliance visit might show up. I think one of the things that's really important in this context is that we are really mindful of the ways in which we can manage the risk. And so if you think of some of the risky loose parts, things that we heard Robyn talk about, it might be containers and tyres and sheets and fabric and cardboard boxes. Cardboard boxes can be risky. If you would think about that process and think about the way that you would manage the play and be available in that context, then that's how you can pursue risky play with children, but do so in a way that keeps them safe. You might also want to practice with children before you start engaging some of those play experiences, because if children don't know how to manage some of those things, then they might, and you do it for the first time, then they might get really overwhelmed and then not be able to manage that risk. So lots of practicing, lots of talking to children about it, lots of being very much involved in the play with children, making sure that children get the right support that they need, and that you're always there talking to them about the sorts of supports and thinking that children might need to do. It's where critical reflection comes in. And where do you get those loose parts from? Then I think you actually speak to families about where the loose parts might come from. But things like, you could go to your local recycling station. Some of those places have really good recycling things that you can pick up really easily. And make sure that things like tubes and those plumbing parts that might be really helpful are really good. And remember that if they're plastic, so they're light to carry, and if you drop them on your toe, you won't hurt yourself. But you make sure that they are long enough and they've got sort of rounded off the edges, so there's not really spiky bits that might hurt children. So lots of things like that. But speak to families about it. They may actually be able to think about the types of things that they could bring in from their homes. And if the Department of Education comes to visit you for a compliance visit, make sure that you've got those materials stored properly, you bring them out for children to play with at particular times, and that you support children to be actively involved in that process. It's really good also to have older children support younger children in that context as well. I think also people might and lots of you have said that some of you are a little bit risky play phobic too, that you've got a little bit of concern about some of those things. But one of the things that I always say to educators in these sorts of contexts is to try something small first. Do something really little first, and then as you get more confident, and the children get more confident, then you might sort of extend your repertoire. So if you say, for example, something like excursions, for example, you might go to an excursion to the letterbox and then come back, and then next time go up the road and back. So it's like 15 minutes as opposed to 5 minutes, and then you get better and better and better at that process over time. You might ask your maybe nominated supervisor to come with you on your first excursion. You might want to do it when you've got some older children with you, because they might be able to support that conversation. So you just think of different things. You might want to join forces with another educator who lives around the corner from you, and you might be able to sort of come to an agreement where both of you go on an excursion together, and then you can have a situation where you're sort of supporting each other. I know lots of you do some things like that all the time, but start really small, start really local, and start small. Even things like cooking, cooking can be seen as a risky play, and I know some of you are fantastic cooks, so sharing some of those things with children will be really, really exciting. So it sounds like lots of you have got some really great suggestions, and we've got a little bit of an issue with sound, I think. So I'm sorry about that, everybody. I think it's maybe a little bit challenging for some of you in that space, but we might finish up now. So thank you very much, everybody. You can see here that you can participate in the PD in Your Pocket Facebook group. So if you haven't already joined, please do so, and open up the Facebook page and type in PD in Your Pocket, and you'll find it that way. And of course, course, if you want to click on to newsouthwalesfamilydaycare.org, all of the information about PD in your pocket is available to you there. And remember, you can, if you haven't already joined, make sure you join and you share some ideas, and watch out for the evaluation that'll come to you. We'd love your ideas. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating tonight, and hopefully good luck with your risky play and good luck with the process of risk management in your family daycare setting. Thanks, everybody, and good evening.